The engine made a sound that Mira Chen had heard 1,000 times before. It was the sound of something dying, metal grinding against metal, energy coils burning themselves out, and underneath it all, a desperate whine that said the machine was trying its best but failing anyway. She put down her coffee and walked to the viewing port of her repair dock. Outside, a ship was limping toward Waystation Keth-7 on emergency thrusters alone. It was a beautiful ship, she noticed. Sleek silver lines and curves that spoke of money and importance. Ships like that did not come to stations like hers. Ships like that went to the grand repair facilities in the core systems, where technicians wore clean uniforms and charged prices that could buy a small moon. But here it was, trailing smoke and sparks, heading straight for her dock. Mira finished her coffee and started preparing her tools. Whatever was wrong with that ship, she would fix it. That was what she did. That was all she had ever been good at. Waystation Keth-7 was not a place where anyone wanted to be. It floated in a forgotten corner of space, far from the major trade routes and even farther from anything interesting. The station had been built 100 years ago as a mining hub, but the mines had dried up and most of the population had left. Now only a few hundred beings remained, surviving on whatever traffic passed through. Mira had lived here for 12 years. Her mentor, old Kazuo Tanaka, had brought her here when she was 22 years old and full of dreams about seeing the galaxy. He had taught her that the galaxy was not about seeing. It was about doing, about fixing things, about being useful. Kazuo had died 3 years ago. He left her the repair dock, a collection of strange tools, and a philosophy that she still did not fully understand. Charge what the repair is worth, he had told her, not what the parts cost, not what your time is worth, what the repair itself is worth to the person who needs it. She had thought it was just old man nonsense at first, but over the years, she had started to see what he meant. The silver ship docked with a heavy clunk. Mira walked to the airlock and waited. The door opened with a hiss, and she found herself looking at something she had never seen before. The being that stepped out was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished blue stone. Its eyes were large and dark, without any white in them at all. It wore robes that shimmered with colors she could not name, and around its neck hung a medallion that she recognized immediately. The symbol of the Galactic Council. Mira had never met a council member before. She had never expected to meet one. The council ruled over 800 species across 1,000 star systems. They were the most powerful beings in known space, and one of them was standing in her repair dock, looking at her with those dark eyes. "You are the mechanic," the being said. Its voice was like wind through crystals, high and musical. "I am," Mira said. "What happened to your ship?" "I do not know. I am not familiar with mechanical things. It simply stopped working properly 3 hours ago. I managed to reach the station on emergency power, but I cannot continue my journey without repairs." Mira nodded and walked past the council member into the ship. The interior was as beautiful as the exterior, all smooth surfaces and soft lighting. But she ignored the luxury and went straight to the engine room. Within minutes, she found the problem. "Your primary energy coil is burned out." She called back to the council member, who had followed her inside. "And because it burned out, it damaged your secondary systems. The whole thing needs to be rebuilt. How long will this take?" Mira considered. On a normal day, with normal parts, she would say a week. But she could see the tension in the council member's posture, the worry in those dark eyes. This was not a normal situation. "Where do you need to be?" she asked. The council member seemed surprised by the question. "I must reach the council chambers on Verith Prime within 3 days. There's an emergency session. The matter is of extreme importance." "What kind of emergency?" Again, the council member looked surprised. Perhaps it was not used to mechanics asking questions. But after a moment, it answered. "The credit paradox. You would not understand. It is a complex economic matter that has troubled the council for centuries. But recent events have made it urgent. If we do not find a solution, there will be economic collapse. Perhaps even war." Mira had heard of the credit paradox, though she did not know much about it. Something about different species not being able to agree on what things were worth. It seemed like a strange problem to her. In her experience, things were worth whatever people agreed they were worth. But she was just a mechanic. What did she know about galactic economics? "I can have you flying in 18 hours, she said. The council member stared at her. "That is impossible. You said the whole system needs to be rebuilt." "It does. But I have parts from other ships. Old parts. They are not pretty, but they work. I can make your ship fly. It will not be comfortable, and you will need proper repairs when you reach Verith Prime. But you will get there." For a long moment, the council member said nothing. Then it inclined its head in what might have been gratitude. "Very well. Do what you must. I will pay whatever you ask." Mira smiled and went to work. 18 hours later, she was covered in grease and exhausted, but the ship was ready. She had replaced the burn coil with one from a freighter that had been scrapped 10 years ago. She had rewired the secondary systems using techniques that Kazuo had taught her, tricks that no manual would ever contain. The ship would not be fast or smooth, but it would fly. The council member walked round the engine room, examining her work. Mira could see confusion in its posture. "This is not standard repair," it said. "No, it is better. Better. But the parts are old. The wiring is unconventional. Any proper technician would say this is wrong." Mira wiped her hands on a rag. "Any proper technician would have told you to wait a week for new parts. But you do not have a week. You have a galaxy to save, apparently. So I gave you what you need. A ship that flies right now." The council member was quiet for a moment. Then it reached into its robes and produced a credit chip. "Name your price." This was the moment that Kazuo had trained her for. The moment that most mechanics got wrong. They would look at the expensive ship, the important customer, the fancy robes, and they would name a high number. Or they would look at their own poverty, their failing station, their desperate need for money, and they would name a low number out of fear. But Mira did not think about any of those things. She thought about the repair itself, what it meant, what it was worth. "How important is this meeting?" she asked. The council member tilted its head. "I told you. It concerns the economic stability of the entire galaxy. And if you are late, if you do not arrive in time, then the session will proceed without me." The Vethkai delegation would lose its voice. "The proposals we have worked on for decades might fail. Wars could begin. Millions might die." Mira nodded slowly. "Then I charge you nothing." The council member went very still. "Nothing. I do not understand. I fixed your ship so you could save lives, so you could prevent war. That is payment enough. I did not become a mechanic to get rich. I became a mechanic because I like helping people continue their journeys." She could see the council member struggling with this. It was probably used to complex negotiations, to careful calculations of value and worth. The simplicity of her answer seemed to confuse it deeply. "This is not how economics works," it said finally. "Maybe that is why your economics are broken." The words came out before Mira could stop them. She regretted them immediately. Who was she to criticize the Galactic Council? She was nobody, a mechanic on a dying station in a forgotten corner of space. But the council member did not seem offended. Instead, it looked at her with new interest. "What do you mean by that?" Mira shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "I do not know. I do not understand your credit paradox. I just know that in my repair dock, things work fine. People come in with broken ships. I fix them. They pay what seems fair to both of us. No one argues. No one fights. Everyone leaves satisfied. And how do you determine what is fair? I ask them where they are going, what is waiting for them, what the repair means to their life. Then I know what to charge." The council member was silent for a long time. When it spoke again, its voice was different, softer, almost wondering. "For 300 years, the greatest minds in the galaxy have tried to solve the credit paradox. We have employed philosophers and economists and artificial intelligences. We have written millions of pages of theory. We have built systems of incredible complexity. And none of it has worked." It looked at Mira with those dark ancient eyes. "But you, a human mechanic on a forgotten station, might have found the answer without even trying." Mira laughed. "I do not have any answers. I just fix ships, perhaps. But I would like you to come with me to Verith Prime. I would like you to explain your pricing system to the council. That is ridiculous. I am no one. They would not listen to me. They will if I ask them to. I am Councillor Vethmer, senior representative of the Vethkai people. My voice carries weight. Mira stared at the being she had thought was just another stranded traveler, a senior counselor, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, asking her for help. I cannot leave my station, she said. Why not? She tried to think of a reason. Her business, her responsibilities, her fear of looking. Verith Prime was nothing like Mira had imagined. She had expected a planet, something solid and familiar. Instead, the council chambers existed on a massive structure that floated in empty space, far from any star. It was shaped like a flower with 1,000 petals, each petal a different color and material, representing a different member species. As their ship approached, Mira pressed her face against the viewing port like a child seeing snow for the first time. She had spent 12 years fixing ships that came from places like this. She had never thought she would see one herself. It is called the Convergence, Counselor Vethmer said beside her. Built over 2,000 years ago as neutral ground for all species. No weapons are allowed within 10 light years. No violence has ever occurred here. It is beautiful, Mira whispered. It is also dying. Slowly, but surely. The credit paradox is strangling it. Trade between species has dropped by 40% in the last decade. Some delegations cannot even afford to send representatives anymore. If we do not find a solution soon, the Convergence will become a monument to our failure. They docked at a port reserved for senior counselors. Mira followed Vethmer through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked. The walls were alive somehow, responding to the beings that passed through them. Mira's section turned into simple metal panels with soft lighting. When a creature made of living flame passed her, the walls near it became something like stone that could withstand the heat. The council chambers themselves took her breath away. The room was vast, bigger than the entire station, where she had spent the last 12 years. Thousands of seats rose in tiers round a central platform, and in those seats sat beings of every shape and size and color. Some had bodies made of crystal, others floated in tanks of strange liquid. A few seemed to be made of pure light, barely visible unless she looked at them from the corner of her eye. And they were all looking at her. Vethmer led her to the central platform. A hush fell over the chamber. Mira could feel the weight of ancient eyes examining her, judging her, finding her small and insignificant. Counselors of the Convergence, Vethmer announced, its crystal voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. I present Mira Chen, a human mechanic from the outer territories. I believe she may hold insight into the credit paradox. The silence that followed was worse than laughter would have been. Then, slowly, sounds began to rise from the assembled beings. Clicking, humming, vibrating, speaking in 100 different ways. The translation system in Mira's ear turned it all into words she could understand. A human? They have only been in space for 300 years. A mechanic? We need economists, not laborers. This is an insult to the serious work of this council. Counselor Vethmer has wasted our time before, but this is a new low. Mira felt her face grow hot. She wanted to run, to hide, to go back to her station where she understood things. But Kazuo's voice came to her again, steady and calm. When they doubt you, work harder. When they mock you, prove them wrong. I know I do not belong here, she said. And the chamber fell quiet at the sound of her small human voice. I do not understand your economics or your theories. I am just a mechanic. But Counselor Vethmer asked me to come, and I thought maybe I could help. If I cannot, I will leave and stop wasting your time. A being made of shifting geometric shapes spoke from the upper tiers. The translation came through as cold and precise. Very well, human. Explain your supposed insight. We have been working on this problem for 3 centuries. What can you offer that our finest minds have not? Mira took a deep breath. I run a repair dock. Ships come in broken. I fix them. People pay me. That is all I know. And how does that relate to the credit paradox? I do not know. Counselor Vethmer seemed interested in how I decide what to charge. But it is nothing special. I just ask people what the repair means to them, where they are going, what is waiting for them. Then I charge based on that. The geometric being made a sound like breaking glass. That is absurd. Value cannot be determined by emotional factors. Value must be objective, measurable, universal. Otherwise, there can be no fair exchange. Why not? Mira asked. The chamber erupted. A dozen beings began speaking at once, all of them telling her why she was wrong. The crystalline Marathi explained that only physical matter had real value. The hive mind collector could not understand how individuals could own anything. The energy beings called the vast had no concept of scarcity at all. Each species had their own theory of value, and none of them could agree. Mira listened to all of it. She did not understand most of it, but she began to see something that worried her. "Can I ask a question?" she said when the noise died down. "Speak," said the geometric being. "How do you actually trade things? Right now, today. If you cannot agree on value, how do you exchange anything?" The being seemed surprised by the question. "We use the universal credit system. It calculates the value of goods and services based on 18,000 variables, accounting for the preferences of all member species. Every transaction is processed through the central exchange, where fair value is determined." "Can I see it? The system, I mean. Can I watch how it works?" There was murmuring throughout the chamber. Finally, a being that looked like a tree made of metal and light spoke up. "That is not an unreasonable request. Perhaps seeing the system will help the human understand why her simple ideas cannot work at scale." Several counselors agreed to escort Mira to the central exchange. She left the main chamber feeling smaller than ever. She had said nothing useful. She had revealed her ignorance. These beings had been thinking about this problem for longer than humans had existed as a species. What arrogance had made her think she could help? The central exchange was located in the heart of the convergence. It was a room filled with light and sound, with screens showing numbers that changed too fast to follow, and machines humming with constant activity. Hundreds of beings worked at stations, processing transactions, checking calculations, arguing over decimal points. Mira watched as two merchants tried to complete a simple trade. One was selling food. The other was selling fuel. Both needed what the other had. It should have been easy, but it was not easy. The system calculated that the food was worth more to the fuel merchant than the fuel was worth to the food merchant, based on their species' relative need profiles. But the fuel merchant disagreed with how the system weighted certain factors. An argument began. Bureaucrats were called in. Forms were filled out. Appeals were filed. 3 hours later, the trade had still not been completed. Both merchants left in frustration, neither of them getting what they needed. Mira watched the same scene repeat itself a dozen times. A doctor needed medical supplies, but could not afford them because her species valued time differently than the species selling the supplies. A family trying to reach a new home could not buy passage because the transport company could not agree on the value of their payment. A young being who just wanted to buy a gift for its parents spent an entire day trying to convert its local currency into something the shop would accept. These were not complex financial transactions. These were simple exchanges between beings who wanted to help each other, and the system was stopping them. "Why is it like this?" Mira asked the counselor escorting her. "Because we must be fair," the counselor replied. "If we do not calculate exact values, some species would take advantage of others. The strong would exploit the weak. There would be chaos, but there is chaos already. I have watched for hours, and I have not seen a single being get what they needed. The system is supposed to help them, but it is hurting them instead." The counselor made a gesture that might have been agreement. "The system is imperfect. That is why we seek solutions to the credit paradox." Mira shook her head slowly. "I do not think you need better calculations. I think you need to stop calculating altogether. That is impossible. Without calculations, how would we ensure fairness? By trusting beings to find their own fairness." The counselor stared at her as if she had suggested setting the convergence on fire. "Trust, beings cannot be trusted. They are selfish. They will cheat. They will exploit. Some will," Mira agreed, "but most will not. Most beings want to exchange fairly. They want to help each other. I see it every day in my repair dock. People do not try to cheat me. They do not try to exploit my need for money. They pay what seems fair, and I charge what seems fair, and everyone leaves satisfied. Your repair dock is a tiny operation with a few customers per week. We are talking about trillions of transactions per day across 1,000 star systems. The scale is incomprehensible." Mira nodded. She could not argue with that. Her ideas felt foolish in the face of such enormity. She was just a mechanic. What did she know about running a galactic economy? But she could not forget the faces of the beings she had watched. The doctor who could not get supplies. The family who could not get home. The child who just wanted to make its parent happy. These were not statistics or economic theories. These were real beings in real pain. And the system that was supposed to help them was causing that pain. "I want to try something," she said. "What?" "I want to set up a small trading zone. Just a corner of the exchange. No calculations, no forms. Just beings exchanging directly with each other, finding their own fair value. I want to see what happens." The counselor hesitated. That health corner they gave Mira was small and forgotten. It had been a storage area once, tucked away where no one important would see it. The message was clear. They expected her to fail quietly, away from the eyes of the council. But Mira did not mind. She had built her whole career in forgotten corners. She knew how to make things work with limited space and limited resources. She spent the first day just preparing the area. She removed the official signage with its complicated rules and fee schedules. She cleared away the forms and the calculation terminals. In their place, she put simple chairs and tables where beings could sit and talk. She hung a sign that said only 3 words, "Trade happens here." On the second day, she opened. No one came. Mira sat alone in her corner, watching the busy exchange around her. Beings hurried past, to focus on their calculations and arguments, to notice the quiet space she had created. She felt foolish sitting there with her empty tables while the real economy churned around her. But she did not give up. Kazuo had taught her patience. Repairs took time. Trust took longer. On the third day, a small being approached her corner. It looked like a child's drawing of a flower, all wobbly petals and uncertain lines. Mira later learned it was a young flourish, a species that changed shape based on their emotional state. "Is this place really free of the system?" the young flourish asked, its petals trembling. "It is," Mira said. "What do you need?" The story came out slowly. The young flourish had traveled across 3 systems to bring a gift to its dying grandparent. The gift was a memory crystal, a recording of the family singing the grandparents' favorite songs. It was priceless to the family. It was worthless according to the universal credit system, which could not calculate the value of emotional attachments. The young flourish needed fuel to complete its journey. It had the memory crystal to trade, but no fuel merchant would accept something the system said was worthless. Mira listened to the whole story. Then she stood up. "Wait here," she said. She walked into the main exchange and found a fuel merchant, a gruff being covered in metallic scales. She explained the situation. The fuel merchant made a dismissive sound. "I cannot accept trade goods the system does not recognize. My suppliers would not accept them from me. The whole chain would break down." "Forget about the chain for a moment," Mira said. "If you were dying, and your grandchild traveled across 3 systems to bring you the sound of your family singing, what would that be worth to you?" The fuel merchant went still. Its scales shifted color slightly, from harsh silver to something softer. "My grandparents raised me," it said quietly. "They died before I could say goodbye. If I could hear them sing one more time, I would give everything I own. Then you understand. Understanding does not fill my fuel tanks." "No, but maybe I can." Mira pulled out the credit chip that Counselor Vethmer had tried to give her. She had never cashed it in. "I will buy fuel from you at market rate. You give the fuel to the young flourish. In return, it gives you something the system says is worthless, but that you and I both know is not." The fuel merchant stared at her. "You would spend your own credits on a stranger?" "I would spend them on helping someone get home to say goodbye. That is worth more than anything I could buy for myself." Something changed in the fuel merchant's posture. Its scales softened further, and when it spoke again, its voice was different. "Keep your credits. Human. I will give the young one enough fuel to complete its journey. And in return, I would like a copy of the memory crystal. Perhaps the songs of another family will help me remember my own." They returned to Mira's corner together. The young flourish could not believe what was happening. It kept asking if there were forms to sign, calculations to review, appeals to file. Mira told it no, just an exchange between beings who understood what the other needed. The fuel merchant left with a copy of the memory crystal. The young flourish left with a full tank. And Mira sat back down in her corner, smiling. Word spread. Within a week, Mira's corner was busy. Beings came with goods and services the system could not value properly. Art that spoke to the soul but had no market price. Skills that were needed but not recognized by official categories. Time and attention and care that could not be measured in credits. They came, and they traded, and they left satisfied. Mira did not run the exchanges. She just facilitated them. She asked questions. She helped beings understand what the other really needed. Sometimes she translated, not between languages, but between ways of thinking. The crystalline Marathi thought matter was sacred, so she helped them see that the energy beings valued matter too, just in a different way. The hive mind collectorate could not understand individual ownership, so she reframed exchanges as shared contributions to collective well-being. The key, she discovered, was context. Value was not a number. It was a story. Every exchange had a story behind it, and when beings understood each other's stories, fair trade became natural. A doctor who needed supplies was not just a customer making a purchase. She was a healer trying to save lives. When the supply merchant understood this, they found a way to make the exchange work. Not because the numbers added up, but because they both wanted those lives saved. A family trying to get home was not just passengers on a transport. They were parents returning to children who missed them. When the transport captain understood this, she made room on her ship, not because she needed the money, but because she remembered what it felt like to be far from the one she loved. Story by story, exchange by exchange, Mira's corner grew. More beings came. More trades happened. The system runners tried to ignore it at first, then became curious, then hostile. "You are disrupting the established order," a senior bureaucrat told her one day. "Your unsanctioned trades are creating inconsistencies in our valuation models. Are the beings who trade here satisfied?" Mira asked. "That is not the point. It is exactly the point. The point of an economy is to help beings get what they need. If they are getting what they need, the economy is working. If they are not, it does not matter how perfect your models are." The bureaucrat left in frustration. But Mira knew she had made an enemy. That night, she sat in her corner alone, thinking about Kazuo. He had grown up poor on Earth, in a small village where money was scarce, but community was strong. People helped each other not because they expected payment, but because helping was what you did. When your neighbor's roof broke, you fixed it. When your friend needed food, you shared yours. No one kept track of who owed what to whom. The village itself was the ledger, and everyone contributed what they could. He had brought that philosophy with him to the stars, and he had passed it on to Mira. "Value is not what something costs," he had told her once, sitting in the repair dock as rain fell outside. "Value is what something means. A glass of water costs almost nothing, but to a man dying of thirst, it means everything. You cannot separate the thing from the context. You cannot separate the price from the person." She had not fully understood him then. She was beginning to understand now. The council members who had dismissed her were starting to pay attention. Councillor Vethmer visited her corner often, watching the trades with those dark, thoughtful eyes. Other councillors came too, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. "It works because it is small," they told her. "It cannot scale. When millions of transactions must happen per day, you cannot have conversations about context and meaning. You need systems. You need calculations." Maybe, Mira admitted. But maybe the problem is not that you need calculations. Maybe the problem is that you need so many transactions. If beings trusted each other more, they would not need to trade as often. They would share. They would cooperate. They would form relationships instead of contracts. That is naive. Beings are selfish. Some are. Most are not. In my experience, most beings want to help each other. They just need systems that let them, instead of systems that get in the way. The hostile councillors grew more hostile. Mira began to hear rumors of powerful beings who wanted her experiment shut down. Economic interests that profited from the current complexity. Species that had built their entire status on manipulating the existing system. But she also heard other rumors of beings inspired by her corner, of small trading networks forming in the outer territories, abandoning the universal credit system entirely, of a movement growing, not organized or led by anyone, just spreading naturally like water finding its own level. The fuel merchant came back to visit her. His scales were lighter now, softer colors that spoke of contentment. "I have been thinking about what you did," he said. "I have been thinking about my grandparents. I decided to do something different with my business. Instead of just selling fuel, I started asking customers where they were going, why they needed to travel, what was waiting for them, what happened. Some of them told me stories that broke my heart. Families separated, loved ones sick, dreams about to die for lack of a few credits. And I realized I had been passing these beings for years, taking their money, never knowing who they were. What did you do?" The fuel merchant's scales shimmered. The crisis came without warning. Mira woke to alarms screaming through the convergence. Red lights flashed in corridors that had never known emergency. Beings ran in every direction, their voices mixing into a wall of fear and confusion. She found Counselor Vethmer in the main chamber, where the giant screens showed maps of the galaxy that had turned angry red in 100 places. "What is happening?" she asked. "The Meridian Collective has initiated a value strike," Vethmer said, its crystal voice tight with tension. "They have stopped all trade, all of it. No goods flow in or out of their territory." The Meridian Collective. Mira knew the name. They controlled nearly a third of the galaxy's manufacturing capacity. Without them, supply chains that had operated for centuries would collapse overnight. "Why?" she asked. "They claim the universal credit system has been unfairly valuing their products for decades. They say they are tired of subsidizing species who do not appreciate their work." Vethmer paused. "They are not wrong about the unfairness. They are just choosing the worst possible way to address it." The chamber filled with counselors, all of them shouting, accusing, demanding action. The Meridian representatives sat silent in their section, their many-limbed bodies still as stone. Within hours, the effects began to show. Manufacturing worlds ran out of raw materials. Food distribution networks failed because transport ships could not refuel. Medical supplies stopped moving, leaving hospitals across 1,000 systems to ration what they had. The council debated. They argued about sanctions and pressure and economic weapons. They blamed each other, blamed the system, blamed history. But no one had an answer. Days passed. The crisis deepened. World began to starve. Beings began to die. Mira watched it all from her corner, feeling helpless. Her small trading space had become meaningless in the face of galactic collapse. What good were conversations about context and meaning when entire planets were running out of food? She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She sat in her corner and watched the screens showing red spreading across the map like a disease. On the 5th day, she decided to go home. "I cannot help here," she told Counselor Vethmer. "I am just a mechanic. This is beyond anything I can fix." Vethmer was quiet for a long moment. Then it said, "Do you remember what you told me when you repaired my ship? You said you charged nothing because you fixed it so I could save lives. You said that was payment enough. I remember. You also said that maybe the reason economics are broken is that they forgot what value really means." I said a lot of foolish things. Were they foolish or were they true? Mira did not answer. She did not know anymore. She booked passage back to Waystation Keth 7. The journey would take 2 weeks, assuming the transport ships were still running. She packed her few belongings and prepared to leave. Then she received a message from home. It was from her neighbor, old Jax, who ran the food distribution center on the station. His face was tired, but his eyes were bright. "Mira, you need to see this," he said. "Something strange is happening." The message included a video. It showed the main trading area of Waystation Keth 7, usually empty and quiet. But in the video, it was full. Beings from different species were crowded together, exchanging goods, sharing resources, talking in small groups. The supply ships stopped coming. Jax explained. "We should have run out of food by now." But people started sharing what they had. Not selling, sharing. They are calling it the Mira method. They say they learned it from a mechanic who used to live here. Mira stared at the screen, not understanding. "It is spreading," Jax continued. Other stations are doing the same thing. Instead of waiting for the formal economy to restart, they are trading directly with each other. No credits, no calculations, just asking what each other needs and finding ways to provide it. Another message came in. Then another. Reports from across the outer territories. Small communities abandoning the universal credit system and forming their own exchange networks. Beings who had never met sharing resources with beings on the other side of the galaxy. Because someone in the network vouched for them that it was chaos by every standard measure. No central authority. No official valuations. No way to ensure fairness or prevent exploitation. And yet it was working. Mira canceled her transport home. She returned to the council chamber, pushing through crowds of panicking beings until she reached the central platform. Listen to me. She shouted. The chamber fell silent. Thousands of eyes turned to the small human who had interrupted their debate. The outer territories are surviving, she said. Not because of your system, because they abandoned it. She showed them the messages, the videos, the reports. The council watched in disbelief as images of functioning trade networks appeared on the screens. This is impossible, said the geometric being who had challenged her on the first day. Without standardized valuations, there can be no fair exchange. They must be exploiting each other. Then explain why satisfaction rates in these networks are higher than they ever were under your system. Explain why disputes are resolved faster. Explain why beings who were enemies are now cooperating because they realize they need each other. It is a temporary response to crisis. It will collapse, maybe, or maybe it will grow, because beings want to help each other. They always have. Your system was supposed to facilitate that help, but instead it got in the way. It made every exchange a battle over calculations. It made beings suspicious of each other because the system told them they might be cheated. She pointed to the red map on the screen. The Meridian Collective started this crisis because they felt the system was unfair. And they were right. But the solution is not to fight over who gets to control the system. The solution is to stop letting the system control us. You are suggesting we abandon centuries of economic infrastructure? That we trust beings to trade fairly without any oversight? I am suggesting we trust beings to find their own fairness. Set basic rules about fraud and force. Provide frameworks for disputes. But stop trying to calculate the value of every exchange. Let beings determine that for themselves. The chamber erupted in argument. But this time, Mira heard something different in the voices. Not just dismissal and mockery. Some of them were considering her words. Councillor Vethmer stood beside her. The human is right about one thing. Our current system is failing. We have tried to improve it for 3 centuries and made it worse. Perhaps it is time to try something different. Something different. You mean chaos. I mean trust. A commodity we have been too afraid to trade in. The debate continued for hours. But as it went on, more reports came in from the outer territories. The parallel economy was not collapsing. It was growing. Species that had never cooperated were forming partnerships. Resources were flowing to where they were needed, not where the calculations said they should go. And slowly, carefully, some of the major trading blocs began to join. The first was a collective of agricultural worlds. They had been trying to negotiate food shipments through official channels for days without success. In desperation, they reached out to the parallel network and asked what other beings needed in exchange for transport. The answer surprised them. A group of beings on the other side of the galaxy had excess transport capacity, but needed agricultural products. They connected, negotiated their own terms, and within hours, food shipments were moving. Then another block joined. Then another. The red on the map began to fade. The Meridian Collective watched all of this in silence. Their value strike had been meant to force the council to acknowledge their grievances. Instead, it had accelerated the very change they had feared, the dissolution of the system that gave them power. On the 10th day of the crisis, a representative of the Meridian Collective asked to speak. We have been watching the parallel economy, the representative said. We expected it to fail. We expected chaos and exploitation. Instead, we have seen something else. Beings treating each other with respect, finding fair terms through conversation instead of calculation, building relationships instead of contracts. The chamber was silent. We initiated this strike because we felt we were not valued. We were treated as machines, expected to produce without appreciation, without recognition of what our work meant. The system reduced us to numbers. The representative turned to look at Mira. But this human does not see numbers. She sees stories. She sees meaning. She asks not what something costs, but what it is worth. And in her way of thinking, our work has value, real value, not because a system calculates it, but because other beings recognize it. The representative made a gesture of deep significance in Meridian culture. We are ending our strike, not because we were forced to, not because we got what we demanded, but because we have seen a better way. We will join the parallel economy. We will trade based on trust and context and relationship, and we will see what happens. The chamber erupted, not in argument this time, in something that sounded almost like celebration. Mira stood on the platform, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and she felt like crying. Not because she had won anything. She had not won anything. She had just shown them something they had forgotten, that beings wanted to help each other, that trust is possible, that the simplest answer is sometimes the right one. The crisis was not over. There would be chaos and confusion as the old system dissolved and the new one grew. There would be exploitation. A year had passed since the crisis that changed everything. Mira stood at the viewing port of her repair dock, watching ships come and go from Waystation Keth 7. The station looked different now. Fresh paint-covered walls that had been gray and tired for decades. New lights illuminated corridors that had been dim with neglect. Beings from a dozen species moved through the trading areas, talking, laughing, building relationships that would have been impossible under the old system. The station had become something unexpected. A pilgrimage site, almost. Beings traveled from across the galaxy to see where the new economy had begun. They wanted to understand how a forgotten outpost had produced ideas that were transforming civilization. Mira found it all slightly embarrassing. She was still just a mechanic. She still spent most of her days elbow deep in engine parts, covered in grease, doing the work she had always done. The galaxy might be changing, but her repair dock remained the same. A chime announced a visitor. She wiped her hands and walked to the airlock. Councillor Vethmer stood outside, looking as calm and dignified as always. But there was something different in those dark eyes, a lightness that had not been there before. "It has been too long," Vethmer said. "You could have called ahead. I wanted to surprise you. Also, my ship is making a strange noise." Mira laughed and let the councillor in. They walked together through the station, past the busy trading areas, to the quiet corner where Mira still kept a pot of coffee and a few worn chairs. "The council has dissolved the universal credit system," Vethmer said as they sat down. "Officially, as of yesterday. It took a year of debate, but it is done, I heard. What replaces it? Nothing. Or rather, everything. Beings are free to trade however they wish. Some still use formal calculations. Some use contextual negotiation. Some form cooperative networks. Some barter directly. The Council provides frameworks for dispute resolution and basic rules against fraud, but otherwise stays out of the way. Is it working?" Vethmer considered the question carefully. "Differently. Some sectors are more efficient than before. Some are less. Total trade volume has decreased, but satisfaction rates have increased dramatically. Beings seem happier, even when they have less. Maybe having less is not the problem. Maybe having less connection was the problem. That is what the economists are starting to conclude. They have a new field now. Relational economics, they call it. The study of how trust and context affect exchange. They cite your repair dock in their papers." Mira shook her head. "I do not understand why. I did not invent anything. I just did what Kazuo taught me, what humans have done for thousands of years, what every species does when the formal systems are not watching. Perhaps that is precisely why it matters. You reminded us of something we had forgotten, that economics is not about numbers. It is about beings helping each other live." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside the viewing port, a transport ship was docking, its hull decorated with symbols from a dozen different worlds. A mixed crew, Mira realized. Species that had been rivals for centuries, now working together. "There's something else," Vethmer said eventually. The Council would like to honor you. A formal ceremony. Recognition of your contribution to galactic civilization. There is talk of naming a principle after you. The Chen Doctrine, they wanted to call it. Mira looked at the counselor with an expression close to horror. Please do not do that. I told them you would refuse, but I had to ask. I did not do this for recognition. I did not do this at all. I just asked questions and watched what happened. The beings who did the real work are out there, trading, trusting, building relationships. They deserve the credit, not me. Vethmer made the sound that might have been a laugh. You are a strange being, Mira Chen. Most would accept the honor gladly. Most would use it to gain power and influence. What would I do with power and influence? I am a mechanic. I fix engines. That is enough, is it? The question hung in the air. Mira thought about it seriously. Yes, she said finally, it is. Kazuo taught me that your job is to help people continue their journeys. That is what I do. That is all I have ever wanted to do. Fixing engines is just one way. Fixing economies turned out to be another. But the principle is the same. She stood and walked to the viewing port, watching the ships move through the darkness. Every being you see out there is on a journey, going somewhere, toward something. Family, opportunity, hope. My job is not to tell them where to go or how to get there. My job is to remove the obstacles, to make the path a little easier. Whether that obstacle is a broken engine or a broken economy, it does not matter. The work is the same. Vethmer joined her at the port. Together, they watched the traffic flow. What will you do now? The counselor asked. What I have always done. There's a ship in my dock right now with a damaged thrust array. The pilot is a young being trying to reach its homeworld for a wedding. The repairs are extensive, but I think I can have them flying by tomorrow. And how much will you charge? Mira smiled. I will ask about the wedding. Who is getting married? How far they have traveled to attend? What it means to them to be there? Then I will know. The Chen Doctrine, Vethmer murmured. Please stop calling it that. The counselor made the laughing sound again. Very well. I should let you return to your work. But I will visit again, if you will have me. You are always welcome. And Vethmer? Yes, thank you. For believing in me when no one else did. For bringing me to the council. For giving a mechanic from a forgotten station a chance to be heard. The counselor's posture shifted in a way that suggested deep emotion. Thank you for reminding us what we had forgotten. The galaxy is better for your presence in it. After Vethmer left, Mira returned to her dock. The ship with the damaged thrust array was waiting. The young pilot was pacing anxiously outside the airlock. How bad is it? The pilot asked. Bad enough, but I can fix it. I do not have much to trade. I spent almost everything getting this far. Mira looked at the young being. Its skin changed colors with its emotions, shifting through shades of worry and hope. She could see exhaustion in its posture, but also determination. Tell me about the wedding, she said. The pilot's colors shifted to something warmer. My sibling. My only sibling. We grew up together on a world so far from here that I cannot see the star from this station. We were always close, but when I left to see the galaxy, we grew apart. Years passed. We barely spoke. What changed? The crisis last year. When the supply lines collapsed, I could not reach my family. I did not know if they were safe. I spent weeks trying to find out, and when I finally made contact, I realized how much time I had wasted, how many opportunities to connect I had missed. The pilot's colors pulsed with emotion. My sibling is getting married in 3 days. They asked me to be there, to stand with them, to show that family still matters, even across the distance of stars. I cannot miss this. I cannot. Mira nodded slowly. She understood. She had seen 100 versions of this story in her dock over the years. Beings trying to reach the ones they loved. Beings trying to repair relationships that had been broken by time and distance. I will have you flying by tomorrow morning, she said. But the payment, we will figure that out. Right now, what matters is getting you home. She led the pilot inside and began examining the damaged arrays. The work would take all night. She would not sleep, would not rest until it was done, because this was her purpose. This was what she was meant to do. Not save galaxies or change civilizations. Just help beings continue their journeys, one repair at a time. The night passed in a blur of tools and calculations and careful adjustments. When the morning came, the ship was ready. The pilot stood in the airlock, colors shifting through gratitude too deep for words. "I do not know how to thank you," it said. "Go to the wedding. Stand with your sibling. Rebuild what was lost. That is thanks enough. This is not how I expected the galaxy to work." Mira smiled. "It is how it has always worked. We just forgot for a while." The pilot left, and Mira watched the ship rise from the dock and arc toward the stars, toward home, toward family, toward the things that mattered. She returned to her coffee and her worn chairs. Another ship would arrive soon. Another being with another journey, another story, another obstacle that needed removing. And she would be here, doing what she had always done, what Kazuo had taught her, what humans had known since they first learned to trade around ancient fires on a small blue world. That value is not about numbers. Value is about meaning, about connection, about helping each other live. The greatest economic revolution in galactic history had not been started by economists, or politicians, or philosophers. It had been started by a mechanic who asked the right questions and listened to the answers. And in the end, that was all it took: a willingness to see beings as beings, to hear their stories, to understand what things really meant, to trade not in credits but in trust. The universe was vast and strange and full of wonders beyond counting. But the most wonderful thing of all was also the simplest: beings helping beings, journeys continuing, connections made. Mira Chen sat in her repair dock on a small station in a forgotten corner of space, and she smiled. She had not changed the